What would you do if the person you trusted most, the one who made your home feel safe, your world feel steady, was the very reason your family fell apart? They say the truth hides in plain sight, tucked behind polite smiles, quiet gestures, and the kind of silence that feels almost comforting, until it isn't. For Michael Carter, that silence lived inside his mansion. Polished floors, spotless glass, everything in perfect order. And behind it all, a woman no one ever really saw. Her name was Sarah Miller. She moved through that house like a shadow, cleaning up the traces of a life that wasn't hers. To most, she was invisible, but not to the truth, because every sweep of her broom, every careful touch of her hand, wasn't just habit, it was history. And the day he finally looked past the shine was the day his whole world began to unravel. Snow fell quietly over Lake Tahoe that morning, blanketing the Carter estate. In a silence that felt almost sacred, inside, the mansion was still, not lifeless but hollow. Every footstep echoed too loudly. Every clock ticked too slow. Sarah Miller moved carefully through the corridors, her mop and bucket rolling softly behind her. She'd been cleaning this house for 7 years now. Same rooms, same rhythm. She never rushed, never lingered. Her presence was a whisper, efficient, polite, invisible. To the neighbors, she was just the help. To the few staff who came and went, she was the quiet woman who never took lunch breaks and always left before sunset. No one knew where she lived or if she had family. No one ever asked. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, Sarah would pause by the big window that overlooked the frozen lake. Her gaze would soften, not in admiration but in memory. She'd slip a trembling hand into her apron pocket and touch something. A small, creased photograph. She'd look at it for just a second, her eyes glistening, before folding it back away. The mansion itself was a museum of wealth and loss. Marble floors, oil paintings, and a silence that carried grief like dust. Every corner still whispered the story of Michael Carter, the man who owned it all yet spoke to no one. Sarah had learned his habits well. The times he liked his coffee, the days he locked himself in his study, the way he lingered at the piano but never played it. But she never let him notice that she noticed. Because for Sarah, cleaning wasn't just a job. It was her way of keeping something, or someone, alive. Every polished surface, every folded sheet, every careful motion was a ritual of remembrance. And though she moved like a ghost through that mansion, she was not there for money. She was there for a truth, buried so deep beneath the marble floors that even time had forgotten it. One no one else dared to uncover. But she had a plan that began the day she first set foot in that house. She wasn't cleaning for comfort. She wasn't cleaning for survival. She was cleaning for truth. Michael Carter's mansion stood high above the lake like a monument to isolation. Beautiful from a distance, but cold up close. At 59, Michael was still what magazines once called the genius of Silicon Valley. A man who'd turned a garage startup into an empire before he was 30. But no one called him a genius anymore. Now people called him the ghost billionaire. He hadn't been seen in public for years. No interviews, no galas, no charity events. He lived alone behind stone walls and steel gates, surrounded by things that couldn't speak back. Sculptures, empty rooms, frozen portraits of a family long gone. Every morning, he took his coffee, black and silent in the same chair overlooking the same lake. Sometimes, he'd open the newspaper just to stare at the dates, as if confirming time still moved even when he didn't. His wife, Eleanor, and their infant son had died 2 decades earlier. A car crash outside Reno on a rain-slick road. At least, that's what the reports had said. Since then, Michael had carried grief like a ritual. Quiet, disciplined, unrelenting. He wasn't cruel to Sarah. In fact, he barely spoke to her. But on rare occasions, when he did, his voice carried something unspoken. A kind of respect for her silence. Maybe he recognized it. Sometimes, he would pass her in the long hallway, and their eyes would meet. Just for a second. A flicker of something human. Then gone. The housekeeper and the billionaire. Both haunted by ghosts they never talked about. The staff had changed over the years. But Sarah stayed. She'd never asked for a raise. Never missed a day. Never complained. Michael often wondered why. He didn't know she had memorized every inch of the mansion, including the West Wing. The one he never entered. He didn't know she knew which drawers he opened when he thought no one watched, or how long he lingered by the piano Eleanor once played every Sunday morning. He didn't know that when he locked himself in his study at night, Sarah waited outside the door, listening to the sound of his pen scratching paper, to his sighs, to the moments when he whispered a name under his breath. Eleanor. The mansion was his cage, and he had built it himself. Every door was locked from the inside. Every window overlooked a past he couldn't escape. But Sarah, she had found a way inside that cage. And though neither of them knew it yet, their ghosts were about to meet. Because sometimes truth doesn't knock. It waits for a storm. The storm rolled in without warning. The kind that turns daylight into dusk, and makes even the strongest houses feel fragile. By late afternoon, heavy clouds had swallowed Lake Tahoe. The wind howled through the pines like something alive, shaking the window panes of Michael Carter's mansion. Sarah stood by the kitchen sink, staring at the sky. She'd lived through plenty of storms in this house, but this one felt different. The air carried a weight, a pressure that settled somewhere deep in her chest. She unplugged the vacuum, moved methodically through her final chores, wiping counters, folding towels, checking the windows. But when she reached the west hallway, the one that led to Michael's private study, the lights flickered once, twice, and went out completely. The mansion fell silent. Only the sound of the wind remained, whistling through the vents like a voice from the past. "Mr. Carter," she called softly. No answer. A faint glow spilled from under the study door. Candlelight, maybe. She hesitated, her hand hovering near the knob. For years, she had avoided this door. It was his world, his rules. But something in the storm's roar made her push past hesitation. When she opened it, Michael sat behind his desk, candle burning beside a stack of old ledgers. The light caught his face, calm, unreadable, a man untouched by panic. "Power's out," Sarah said quietly. "I noticed," he replied, not looking up. She nodded, unsure why she'd come in. The room smelled faintly of cedar and paper, like memories sealed too long. Michael finally raised his eyes. "You should stay tonight. Roads will be closed before dark." Sarah hesitated. "I'll be fine." "Stay," he repeated. "It's safer here." So she did. As darkness swallowed the mansion, Michael lit more candles. One in the hall, one by the piano, one near the grand staircase. Their small flames flickered against the portraits on the walls, making the faces seem to breathe again. Later, while checking for leaks near the basement stairs, Michael noticed something odd, a faint metallic sound behind the wall near the laundry room. He followed it to a small utility closet Sarah always kept locked. He frowned. Why would a closet need a padlock? He tugged the handle once. Nothing. Twice. It rattled slightly. From upstairs, Sarah called, "Mr. Carter? You should get some rest." But his curiosity had already taken root. He found the spare key hanging by the fuse box, one he'd never noticed before. And when he turned it in the lock, the sound of metal scraping against metal echoed through the house like a warning. Inside the closet sat an old wooden chair, a dusty mop, and behind them, a rusted metal box with the initials EC carved into the lid. Michael froze. Eleanor Carter. The box was hers. He reached out, fingers trembling slightly, brushing away the layer of dust. Behind him, lightning flashed, a brief, blinding pulse that lit the entire room white. And in that second, he thought he saw movement in the reflection of the closet mirror. Someone standing just behind him. But when he turned, the hallway was empty. Only the storm answered, rattling the windows like it was trying to get in. Michael stared down at the box again, his heart pounding. Whatever was inside it had been waiting for years. He took a slow breath, and when he finally pried open the lid, his past stared right back at him. The hinges screamed as the lid lifted, the sound slicing through the silence like something alive. Inside, time had been trapped. A collection of small, fragile things that shouldn't have survived this long. A silver locket, a folded photograph, and an envelope sealed with the faint imprint of Eleanor's handwriting. Michael's throat tightened. He hadn't seen that handwriting in 20 years. He sank to the floor, candlelight flickering across his face as he reached for the envelope. The paper was brittle. The ink faded. Across the front, in Eleanor's familiar cursive, were the words, "For Michael, only when you're ready." His hands trembled as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet, yellowed at the edges. He began to read, softly at first, almost to himself. "My love, if you're reading this, it means the truth has finally reached you. I need you to believe what I'm about to say, even if every part of you wants to deny it. Our son didn't die that night." The words didn't make sense at first. His mind rejected them like a cruel trick. "They told me the crash killed him, but they lied. I had to protect him. Michael, you were never meant to know. Not until it was safe." Michael stopped reading. The paper shook between his fingers. The room felt smaller now. The walls inching closer, the air heavier. He looked around as though expecting Eleanor herself to appear, explaining the impossible. But only the storm answered, hammering against the windows, demanding to be heard. He read the last lines aloud, his voice breaking. "If anything happens to me, find Sarah. She'll know what to do." The name hit him like a blow. Sarah, his housekeeper. He stared at the page again, reading the line over and over until it blurred. The letters swam in the candlelight, merging with the tears in his eyes. He stumbled to his feet, pacing the narrow space. The sound of the storm grew louder, wind shrieking down the chimney, the house groaning under its weight. He clutched the letter to his chest, heart pounding like a drum. "Sarah," he whispered, "what have you done?" Flashbacks bled into his thoughts. Eleanor's last moments, the crash, the hospital lights, the sound of rain on metal. He remembered her eyes before she went under. Pleading, terrified, as if she knew something he didn't. He sank into the hallway chair, staring at the flickering candles. Dawn was creeping in through the curtains, gray, cold, uncertain, and as the first light touched the floorboards, he realized something else. The envelope had contained not one letter, but two. A second slip of paper had fallen beneath the chair. He bent to pick it up. Just a few words, scrawled hastily in Eleanor's hand. "Don't trust them. They're watching." Michael looked toward the open doorway, suddenly aware of how quiet the mansion had become. The storm had stopped, and somewhere upstairs, he thought he heard footsteps. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the mansion draped in a pale, wintry silence. The world outside looked peaceful. Too peaceful for what Michael Carter now knew. He hadn't slept. The letter lay on his desk, its edges smoothed from the number of times he'd unfolded and refolded it through the night. Every time he read Eleanor's words, his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. "Our son didn't die that night." The phrase looped in his head like a broken record, each repetition cutting deeper. When Sarah arrived in the foyer that morning, she sensed the change before she even saw him. The air felt different, heavier, charged. She set her gloves on the entry table, glanced toward the study, and froze. Michael was standing in the doorway, holding the letter. His eyes, normally distant and composed, burned with something sharper now. "Sarah," he said quietly, "we need to talk." She swallowed, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "Of course, Mr. Carter. Is something wrong?" He stepped closer, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. "You tell me." Her eyes flicked to the envelope. For the briefest moment, her face went pale, almost imperceptibly. But Michael saw it. "Where did you get that?" She whispered. "It was hidden, in a closet you kept locked," he said. His voice cracked on the last word, rage fighting with disbelief. "Why would Eleanor's letter be in your closet?" Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. She looked toward the floor, then at him, her voice soft. "I found it years ago, before I worked here. I didn't know what it was then." "You didn't know?" Michael's tone sharpened. "You expect me to believe that?" Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't step back. "Would you have believed me, Mr. Carter, if I'd told you your wife's letter was hidden in your own house? That your son might still be alive?" The silence between them stretched thin, trembling like a wire ready to snap. Michael's expression faltered, the anger giving way to confusion, to something dangerously close to hope. "What are you saying?" Sarah opened her mouth to answer, but the mansion's alarm system suddenly beeped. Once, twice. Michael turned sharply toward the entryway monitor. The security feed flickered. A dark shape moving beyond the gate. Headlights slicing through the mist. "Someone's here," he muttered. Sarah's hands shook as she whispered, "They found us." Michael looked at her, alarmed. "Who found us?" Before she could answer, the screen went black. Outside, the sound of tires crunching over gravel echoed up the long drive. A black SUV pulled into view, and standing in the headlights was a man in a dark coat, motionless, watching the mansion like he'd been there before. Michael's pulse quickened. "Do you know him?" Sarah didn't answer, her face drained of color. Through the crack of the window blinds, the man looked up, straight at them. Then he smiled. Michael's voice broke the silence, cold and deliberate. "Lock the doors." But before Sarah could move, the sound of the front gate clanged open, and over the security speaker came a calm, unfamiliar voice. "Mr. Carter? I'm here on behalf of Eleanor's estate. My name is Mr. Collins. I believe we need to talk about your wife." Sarah's breath caught. Michael turned to her sharply. "Collins." She looked at him, eyes wide, trembling. "My maiden name," she whispered. "Sarah Collins." The color drained from Michael's face. Eleanor's letter flashed through his mind again. "If anything happens to me, find Sarah." And for the first time, Michael realized he might not know who the woman standing in front of him really was. The mansion felt smaller now. The silence inside pressed against the sound of boots crunching through snow outside. Michael stood in the foyer, the letter still in his hand, watching the figure approach through the frosted glass of the front doors. Sarah hovered behind him, pale and tense, her fingers twisted around the hem of her sweater. A small, nervous motion that betrayed what she was trying so hard to hide. The man stopped just short of the door and knocked. 3 steady, deliberate knocks. Not urgent, not friendly. Michael hesitated before unlatching the bolt. When he opened the door, a blast of icy wind swept through the room, scattering papers from the console table. The stranger stepped inside without waiting for permission, wiping the snow from his coat. He looked mid-40s. Expensive shoes, immaculate gloves, calm eyes that didn't match the weather outside. "Mr. Carter," he said smoothly, offering a small nod. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. My name is Daniel Collins. I represent what's left of your late wife's estate." Michael's grip tightened on the letter. Eleanor's estate was settled 20 years ago. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes, legally, but not completely." His gaze drifted past Michael, toward Sarah. The air seemed to freeze between them. "Sarah," he said softly, "it's been a long time." Her face drained of all color. She took a small step back. "You shouldn't be here." Michael's eyes darted between them. "You know this man?" Sarah didn't answer. Daniel did. "Of course she does," he said easily. "Sarah Collins, my little sister." The words hit like a shockwave. Michael stared at Sarah. She couldn't meet his eyes. "Sister," he repeated slowly. "You said your last name was Miller." She shook her head faintly. I had to. After, her voice broke. "It was safer." "Safer from what?" Daniel took a few steps closer, hands in his coat pockets. "From the people who didn't want you to know the truth." Michael studied him, the careful confidence, the calculated tone. He'd met men like this before in boardrooms, in hostile takeovers, in depositions. The kind who smiled while twisting the knife. "What truth?" he asked quietly. Daniel's eyes glinted. "That your wife didn't just hide your son. She hid something much bigger." The grandfather clock chimed once, twice. Each ring echoed longer than it should have. Sarah's voice trembled. "Daniel, stop." But he didn't. He stepped closer still, lowering his tone. "Tell him, Sarah. Tell him what you've really been doing in this house all these years." Michael's jaw tightened. "I think you should leave." Daniel smiled again, slow and sharp. "Oh, I will. But you'll want to hear this first." He reached into his coat pocket. Michael's heart jumped. For a second, it looked like he was drawing a weapon. But instead, he pulled out a folded photograph. He handed it to Michael. It was a picture of a young woman, Eleanor, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Standing beside her was another man, one Michael had never seen before. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "That picture was taken after the crash. Michael felt the floor tilt beneath him. That's impossible. Daniel looked straight at him. Is it? He turned toward the door, adjusting his gloves. I'll be in touch, Mr. Carter. There's still much you don't understand. He left as quietly as he'd arrived. The sound of his car engine faded into the storm's remnants, leaving only the low hum of the grandfather clock. Michael turned to Sarah, his voice breaking. Tell me the truth. Who are you, really? Tears welled in her eyes. I can't, she whispered. They'll kill him if I do. Michael's face hardened. Kill who? But before she could answer, the lights flickered, once, twice, and the house plunged into darkness. From somewhere outside came the faint crunch of footsteps returning to the door. Then, a metallic click, and a whisper, too close to the window. Sarah, open up. The mansion was swallowed by darkness. Only the thin moonlight spilling through the window gave shape to the furniture, to the fear that seemed to breathe in every corner of the room. Michael stood frozen near the staircase, listening. The voice outside was soft but sharp, the kind that carries familiarity even when you wish it didn't. Sarah, it called again, muffled by the glass. You know how this works. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Sarah's hands shook as she backed away from the door. He shouldn't have found us this soon, she whispered. Michael's voice came low, steady. Who is he? She swallowed hard. Daniel isn't who he says he is. He works for someone. Someone who's been watching this house for years. Watching us. Sarah nodded. Since before I arrived. Michael's breath clouded in the cold air. You need to start explaining. Sarah? Right now. Her eyes glistened in the faint light. I was placed here, Mr. Carter. Not hired. Placed. Someone wanted me close to you. Said it was for your protection. They told me your wife's accident wasn't an accident, and that your son wasn't dead. Michael's chest tightened. Who told you that? I never met him in person. He only called himself Samuel's guardian. Michael blinked. Samuel, the name caught in his throat. He hadn't said it aloud in 20 years. Sarah looked away. Your son. A long, aching silence followed. The wind outside howled like it was trying to drown them both out. Michael took a step closer. If my son's alive, where is he? Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks. I don't know anymore. He was taken from me before I could find him. Michael froze. From you. Before she could answer, a sudden crash echoed through the hallway. The sound of glass shattering somewhere near the back door. Sarah flinched. They're in. Michael moved toward the study, grabbing the old revolver from the drawer. One he hadn't touched in decades. His voice shook with controlled fury. Whoever they are, they're not taking another thing from me. Sarah stepped in front of him. You don't understand. They'll kill him if we fight. Who? Her voice broke. Your son. Before Michael could respond, a heavy thud shook the front door. The handle twisted violently, then went still. The power flickered once, the lights flashed on for a heartbeat, and in that split second, Michael saw the shadow of a man standing just outside the frosted glass. Then everything went black again. The silence stretched long enough to feel like an eternity. And then, a single sound cut through it all. The faint click of a safety being released. Michael turned toward Sarah, whispering, Get down. But before either of them could move, a flash lit up the window, followed by the deafening crack of a gunshot. The echo tore through the mansion, bouncing off the marble floors and dying somewhere in the distance. When the smoke cleared, the doorway was empty. Only blood marked the snow outside, leading away into the trees. Michael lowered the gun. He hadn't fired. Sarah. She was on the ground beside him, clutching her shoulder. Her face was pale, her voice trembling. Michael, she whispered. There's something you need to know. He knelt beside her, pressing his hand to her wound. Save your strength. We'll get help. She shook her head weakly. No, you have to listen. Her eyes met his pain, truth, regret, all mixed in one. I'm not just your housekeeper, she breathed. I'm your son's wife. Michael froze. The storm outside returned, sweeping snow against the windows like applause from the dark. And for the first time in 20 years, Michael Carter felt the ground shift beneath everything he thought he knew. The world felt muffled, as if the storm outside had swallowed every sound except the ragged echo of Sarah's breathing. Michael knelt beside her, pressing a hand against her shoulder. The blood was warm and fast. trickling between his fingers. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of too many years and too much silence. Sarah's eyes fluttered open. "It's not bad," she lied, forcing a weak smile. Michael tore the fabric from his shirt and wrapped it around her wound. "Who did this?" he demanded. "Why are they after you?" "After us?" Sarah turned her head toward the doorway. "He's gone. For now." The words came in broken gasps. "He wasn't here to kill you, Michael. He was here to remind me that they're still watching." Michael's jaw tightened. "Who?" Sarah hesitated, then looked him dead in the eye. "David." The name struck like lightning. For the first time in years, the old memories surged, his brother's smile. The business empire they built together. The fight before the crash. "He's dead," Michael said, half to himself. "He's been dead for 20 years. Sarah winced as she tried to sit up. "That's what they wanted you to believe." He froze. "You're saying my brother never died," she finished softly. "And neither did your son." The air between them thickened. Michael's breath trembled. "You said you were my son's wife. Tell me everything." Sarah's eyes glassed over. 8 years ago, I met Samuel. He found me working at a small cafe in Nevada. Said he'd been looking for answers about his family. About you. He didn't remember much from when he was taken, but he remembered his mother's voice telling him to find the truth. She coughed, blood staining her lip. He was kind. Broken, but kind. We fell in love before either of us realized the danger we were in. Michael swallowed hard. Danger from David? Yes. Samuel discovered something. A trail of hidden accounts, false identities, everything tied to David. He wanted to expose him. But before he could, her voice broke. He vanished. Michael's grip tightened around her hand. "And you came here." "I came here because Samuel's last message said, she hid the truth where music never stops. I didn't understand then, but I thought if I stayed long enough, maybe the house would tell me." Michael sat back, dazed. The thunder outside cracked like an answer from the heavens. "You were looking for him all this time." Sarah nodded faintly. "And now David knows I found you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire had burned low. Only shadows danced across the walls, long, reaching, like the ghosts of everything they'd lost. Michael rose slowly, his expression changing. No longer the haunted man of grief, but something sharper, colder. "Then we find him first. My brother. My son. The truth." Sarah's eyes softened. "You'll need strength for that. And forgiveness." Michael turned toward the window where the blood trail disappeared into the woods. Forgiveness died the night they did. A flash of lightning tore across the sky, and for a moment, the reflection in the glass looked almost human, like someone standing just outside. But when he blinked, the figure was gone. Sarah's voice came faintly from behind him. "Michael, there's another letter. Eleanor wrote more than one." He turned sharply. "Where?" Her lips curved into a faint, trembling smile. Somewhere only she would know. The fire hissed, spitting sparks into the dark. And somewhere deep within the mansion, beneath the sound of the storm and the ticking of the old grandfather clock, a piano key pressed itself down. One note. Soft. Lonely. Michael froze. Sarah's whisper barely reached him. She used to hide everything under music. The note echoed again, as if the house itself had decided to join the conversation. Snow fell like ashes outside the Lake Tahoe mansion. Inside, the air was heavy, not from the storm, but from the truth that had finally begun to unravel. Sarah lay on the couch, pale, but awake, her breathing steadier now. The flickering fire painted her face in trembling gold and shadow. Michael stood by the window, unable to look away from the forest that had swallowed so much of his life. "Start from the beginning," he said quietly. "Tell me about my son." Sarah's gaze softened, and the story pulled them both back in time. 8 years earlier, Reno, Nevada, a roadside diner called Maple's Place. The kind of spot where time seemed to stop between refills of black coffee and the hum of old country songs. Sarah had been a waitress then, young, tired, but full of quiet hope. That night, a stranger walked in. Tall, rugged, mid-20s. His eyes held the same depth Michael's did, storm gray, burdened with secrets. He ordered nothing but a cup of coffee and sat near the window, staring into the dark like it was staring back. When she poured his refill, Their hands brushed. And he flinched, not from the touch, but from what it reminded him of. "Rough day?" she'd asked. He'd given a faint, crooked smile. "Rough life." That was Samuel Carter, a man who didn't even know his real name when he walked into that diner. For weeks, he came back, always to the same booth, always sitting by the window, and slowly he began to talk. About the nightmares, the flashes of a woman's voice singing piano tunes, the scent of lilacs in the backseat of a car before everything went black. "I think someone's looking for me," he told her once. "And I think I'm not supposed to let them find me." Sarah never asked questions. She just listened. Maybe that's why he fell in love with her. They married quietly, in a small chapel just outside Carson City. No family, no guests, just vows whispered through tears and trembling hands. For a moment, Samuel seemed at peace. But peace never stays. One night, she woke up to find him packing a bag. His eyes were wild. "I know who I am," he said. "I know who took me." He kissed her, whispered, "If I don't come back, find the man in the lake house. Tell him I forgive him." That was the last time she saw him alive. Or so she thought. The fire popped, snapping Michael back to the present. He was trembling, not from cold, but from the storm inside him. "You're telling me my son survived that crash, and someone hit him?" Sarah nodded weakly. "Your wife, Eleanor, saved him that night. She gave him to someone she trusted. She knew David was planning something." Michael's throat tightened. "My brother did this to his own family?" Sarah's eyes darkened. "Eleanor left you letters, Michael. Warnings. Clues. She always said she hid the truth where music never stopped. That's why I stayed here. I thought if I listened long enough, the house would tell me." He stared at her, the pieces finally fitting together. His wife's secrecy, his brother's betrayal, his son's disappearance, and this woman, this stranger, who'd carried his truth in silence for years. The room felt smaller now, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sarah shifted, pain flickering across her face. "There's another letter," she whispered. "Somewhere in this house." Michael moved toward the piano in the corner of the room. It was Eleanor's, untouched for decades. His hand hovered over the keys. "She used to play the same song every night," he murmured. "Said it helped her remember who she was." Sarah's voice trembled. "She hid something under music, Michael. Maybe. Under here." He lifted the piano bench, and there it was. A folded envelope, yellowed with time, sealed with Eleanor's handwriting. Michael froze. His heart beat once. Hard. Before he tore it open. Inside were just 3 lines, written in Eleanor's delicate cursive. "If you find this, Michael, trust no one. Especially your brother, David." The room went silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Michael looked up, the blood draining from his face. "David," he whispered. "He's still alive." Sarah stared at him, eyes wide with dread. "Then he knows we've found everything." The old grandfather clock began to chime. Midnight. And outside, far off through the curtain of snow, headlights flickered in the dark. The mansion was eerily quiet after midnight, the kind of silence that hums louder than sound. Michael still clutched the letter, the paper trembling between his fingers. The words, "Trust no one, especially your brother," echoed through his mind like a curse he should have known years ago. Sarah sat beside the fire, pale and shaken. Outside, snow swallowed the world whole. Inside, ghosts from decades past began to breathe again. "She hid this for a reason," Sarah whispered. "But Eleanor, she always hid things in patterns. Music, notes, letters, everything had meaning." Michael's eyes flicked toward the grand piano, the same one that hadn't been touched since the night of the accident. He hesitated, then lifted the lid. The keys were coated in dust. When his trembling fingers pressed one, a haunting note filled the air. Flat, aching, familiar. "That melody," he murmured. "She used to play it when she was anxious. Said it helped her think." Sarah rose, steadying herself on the armrest. "She said she hid something under music. Maybe it wasn't under the bench, but inside the song." Michael stared at her, realization dawning. He reached for the faded sheet music still sitting on the piano. Eleanor's lullaby. On the corner of the page, barely visible, were 4 penciled letters. DAV, his brother's name. He flipped the sheet over, and a small metal key fell out, clinking softly against the floor. A key engraved with Eleanor's initials. Sarah bent down, picked it up with trembling hands. What does it open? Michael thought for a long moment. Then his gaze shifted to the far wall. The old display cabinet Eleanor used to keep locked, even from him. They approached it together. The key fit perfectly. Inside were family photos. Eleanor smiling, Samuel as a baby, and behind them, a small false panel. Michael pried it loose. Out slipped a second envelope, sealed with red wax. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. "Eleanor," he whispered. "What else were you hiding from me?" He broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, elegant, steady, almost too calm for what it said. "If you are reading this, Michael, then the truth has already begun to surface. You were never meant to find this, not until it was too late. David was behind the crash. He wanted control of the company, the inheritance, everything. I saved Samuel that night and sent him away. I had help from someone I trusted more than blood. If you love your son, do not confront David. Protect him instead, because the man you think you buried is not dead, and neither is your brother." Michael's hands went cold. His eyes darted across the words again, refusing to believe them. "David, alive? That's impossible." Sarah's voice quivered. "Then who was the man outside? The one who knew my name?" Michael swallowed hard. "David's man, maybe, or David himself." He sank into a chair, the firelight cutting across his face, part fury, part grief. "My wife knew my brother tried to kill me, and she never told me." Sarah stepped closer, her tone gentle but urgent. "Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she was protecting you, and Samuel." Michael looked up at her, eyes glistening. "And you married my son, and you've been cleaning this house for years, knowing I was the man who thought he'd lost everything." Sarah's tears finally fell. "I didn't want to lie, but I had nowhere else to go. I thought if I stayed close, I might find what Samuel was looking for." Michael's voice cracked. "And what was that?" Sarah hesitated, then whispered, "Forgiveness." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the storm filled the silence, slamming against the glass like it wanted in. Then, a sound, a faint creak from upstairs. Michael's head snapped toward the staircase. "Did you hear that?" Sarah nodded slowly. Her hand drifted to the edge of the coffee table where the gun lay, the one Michael had retrieved after the intruder vanished. Another creak, closer this time. Michael rose, every instinct screaming, "Stay here." He climbed the stairs, each step groaning under his weight. The hallway stretched before him, long and dim. A light flickered from under the study door. He reached for the handle, and froze. Someone was inside. He pushed the door open. The fire was still burning in the hearth. But the chair by the window, the one that had been empty for 20 years, was now occupied. A figure sat there, half shrouded in shadow. "Michael," a familiar voice rasped. His blood ran cold. "Hello, brother." Eh. The storm outside had turned violent, wind howling like something alive, clawing at the windows. Michael stood frozen at the doorway of the study, his breath catching in his throat. There, sitting by the fire, was David Carter, older, thinner, but unmistakably alive. His once polished face now carved with lines of bitterness. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all along. "Michael," he said again, his voice calm, almost casual, "you look like you've seen a ghost." Michael's hand trembled around the doorknob. "You're supposed to be dead." David chuckled softly. "Supposed to be. But you know me. I never liked following the plan." The silence that followed was unbearable. Every flicker of the fire seemed to echo the memories Michael had spent 2 decades trying to bury. "What did you do?" Michael demanded. "What did you do to my family?" David rose slowly from the chair, his shadow stretching long and thin across the rug. "Our family, brother. Let's not pretend you were the only Carter worth saving. You killed them," Michael hissed. "Eleanor. Samuel. You destroyed everything." David tilted his head, eyes glinting in the firelight. "Destroyed? No. I corrected a mistake." Flashback. 20 years earlier. Carter Industries headquarters, San Francisco. 2 brothers, 1 empire. Michael, the visionary. David, the shadow in his wake. Michael had inherited their father's company after years of hard work and loyalty. David had expected the same recognition, but instead, he got a handshake and a corner office. "You always got the love," David once said. "The company, the woman, the family. What did I get, Michael? The leftovers." That resentment festered, turned into poison. David began siphoning funds, making backroom deals. Eleanor discovered it first. She wanted to protect Michael, but that knowledge made her a target. On the night of the accident, David had arranged everything. He'd cut the brakes, bribed a driver to follow, and ensure the car went over the ridge. But what he didn't plan for was Eleanor surviving long enough to save her son. Back in the present, Michael's eyes burned with rage. "You murdered your own blood." David's expression hardened. Blood means nothing when you've been bled dry your whole life. From behind him, Sarah appeared in the doorway. Her voice was quiet but shaking. "You sent someone here tonight. Why? What do you want?" David turned toward her, recognizing her instantly. "Ah, the housekeeper." A pause. Then a cold smile. "No, not just the housekeeper. You're Samuel's wife." Sarah stiffened. David's smirk widened. "You have his eyes. He begged me once. Begged me not to hurt you. Pity he didn't understand how this family works." Michael lunged forward, grabbing David by the collar. "Where is he?" David didn't flinch. "You really want to know?" He leaned in close, whispering, "He's been alive longer than you think. But he's not the man you remember." Michael shoved him back, fury boiling beneath every word. "You're lying." David laughed quietly, smoothing his jacket. "You said that to Eleanor too, right before you buried her." The words hit like a bullet. Sarah's hand tightened around the edge of the doorframe. "What do you mean buried her?" David's gaze cut to her, cold, deliberate. "You never saw a body, did you?" Michael's heart pounded. "Enough. You're trying to twist this." David shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe your wife's been closer than you ever realized." Before Michael could respond, headlights flared outside, bright and harsh against the window. Sarah turned. "Someone's here." David smiled. "Of course they are. Did you think I came alone?" The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the storm. Boots crunching on the snow. Shadows moving toward the front entrance. Michael stepped back, instinctively placing himself between Sarah and his brother. "You're not walking out of here alive, David." David smiled faintly, almost pitying. "Oh, brother. I already did that once." Then the front door burst open. Armed men in black coats stormed inside, guns raised. Sarah screamed as Michael pulled her down behind the couch. The first shot shattered the chandelier, glass raining down like sparks. David ducked, shouting, "Don't kill them. Not yet." Michael fired back. Wild, desperate. The gun clicked empty. He dragged Sarah toward the back hallway as bullets tore through the walls. David's voice followed them through the chaos, echoing down the corridor. "You should have listened to Eleanor, Michael. The truth always costs more than you can afford." They reached the back door. Snow whipped in as Michael shoved it open. Sarah turned back just in time to see David standing at the top of the stairs, his silhouette framed in firelight and smoke. "You can run," David called. "But the past, it always catches up." Then lightning flashed, and he was gone. Outside, the storm raged, swallowing them whole. Michael gripped Sarah's arm, pulling her toward the tree-line. "Where do we go?" she shouted over the wind. He looked back at the mansion, flames starting to lick the curtains through broken glass. "Anywhere but here." The camera pans to the burning house, crackling against the snow. Inside, on the floor of the study, the second letter lies half-burned, Eleanor's last line barely visible through the smoke. "If love couldn't save us then, maybe truth will now." Snow slashed sideways through the night, cold, relentless, and alive with the sound of distant sirens that never seemed to come closer. Michael and Sarah stumbled down the narrow trail behind the mansion, the wind clawing at their faces, every breath burning like fire in their lungs. Behind them, flames devoured the Carter estate. The glow stretched across the frozen lake, a violent pulse of orange and gold against the white. It looked less like a fire, and more like a past finally eating itself alive. "Keep moving," Michael shouted over the storm. His voice was raw, half-broken. They'll circle around. Sarah stumbled. Her hand pressed against the side of her coat where blood had seeped through the fabric. Michael, I can't. He grabbed her arm, steadying her. You can. We're almost at the road. But the road was miles away, and they both knew it. A gust hit so hard it nearly threw them off balance. Snow rose like smoke around them, hiding everything but the faint shimmer of headlights far up the ridge. Moving fast. They're coming. Sarah gasped. David's men. Michael turned to face her, eyes fierce. Then we end this tonight. They found shelter behind an old tool shed near the tree line. Inside, it was dark, cold, and smelled of dust and rusted metal. Michael dropped his jacket over Sarah's shoulders and crouched beside her. You're losing blood, he said. I've had worse, she lied, trying to force a smile. Samuel used to say that when he'd scrape his knees. Said pain was just proof he was still alive. The name hit Michael like a blade. He exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a second. I never got to tell him I was proud of him. I never got to tell Eleanor I was sorry. Sarah reached for his hand, her voice trembling. You don't have to live in what you couldn't say. Just live in what you can still do. Outside, tires crunched over ice. They both froze. Michael peeked through the slats of the wooden wall. Two men in black coats stepped out of a black SUV. Flashlights cutting through the storm. They're checking every path, Sarah whispered. Michael looked around the shed. An old toolbox, rusted nails, a broken lantern. Then his eyes caught something in the corner, a snowmobile, half covered in tarp. Can you drive that thing? She asked. He shook his head. No, but I can crash it real good. Despite everything, she let out a shaky laugh. Then we might just survive this. Minutes later, the engine sputtered to life. The sound roared through the trees. The men turned. Guns raised, too late. The snowmobile shot forward into the storm, throwing a cloud of powder into the air. Bullets chased them, sharp, fast, cracking through the night. One grazed Michael's shoulder, but he didn't slow down. The frozen lake came into view, wide, glittering under flashes of lightning. Sarah shouted, "The ice won't hold." "It'll hold long enough." They hit the ice hard, sliding across the glassy surface. The headlights from behind bounced wildly, closer now. Sarah clung to him, eyes wide with terror. "If we die, Michael." He cut her off, shouting over the wind. "We won't." Then, quieter, almost to himself, "Not again." Hey. Halfway across the lake, the engine coughed, sputtered. "Died. Michael." He cursed under his breath, slamming the starter. Nothing. Behind them, the black SUV stopped at the lake's edge. 3 men stepped out. Sarah's breath hitched. "They'll shoot us down." Michael reached for the gun at his belt. 2 bullets left. Then they'll have to try. The men began walking onto the ice. Slow, confident. Then a loud crack. The ice shifted beneath their boots. Sarah's voice shook. "The ice, it's breaking." Michael's gaze darted across the lake. A faint silhouette moved near the far shore, a figure holding a flashlight, signaling with slow, deliberate motions. Sarah frowned. "Who's that?" He squinted. "I don't know, but they know we're here." The figure waved again, then started running toward them. The gunmen turned their attention that way, and in the chaos, Michael grabbed Sarah's hand. "Now!" They ran, feet slipping, ice fracturing beneath them. Shots rang out. 1, 2, 3, echoing across the frozen expanse. They dove behind a snowdrift as the ice groaned and shattered where they'd just been standing. The men shouted, one falling through with a scream that cut through the storm. Silence followed, just the wind, the crackle of distant fire, and their ragged breaths. Sarah turned to Michael, shaking. "Who was that man with the flashlight?" Michael stared toward the shore. The figure was gone now, vanished into the white. "I don't know," he said. "But whoever they are, they just saved us." Sarah leaned against him, exhausted, trembling. "Where do we go from here?" Michael looked back toward the burning mansion, smoke spiraling into the storm. "Where this all began," he whispered. "Back to the truth." By dawn, the fire had burned out. The lake was silent again. Footprints trailed off into the woods, but the camera lingers on one thing, a half-frozen envelope that had fallen from Sarah's coat during the escape. It's Eleanor's handwriting, but it's not one of the old letters. The ink is fresh. The sun rose over Lake Tahoe, turning the snow into shards of light. The fire was out. Smoke trailed lazily from what used to be the Carter mansion, a skeleton of memories now buried in ash. Michael and Sarah trudged through the forest, their breath visible in the freezing air. Neither spoke. There was too much unsaid, too much lost. Sarah held the half-frozen envelope she'd found in the snow, wrapped carefully in her scarf. "It's her handwriting," she murmured. "But how could it be fresh? She's been gone 20 years. Michael's voice was low, almost distant. "Maybe she wasn't gone as long as we thought." The words hung between them. Heavy, dangerous. They found shelter in an abandoned ranger cabin overlooking the lake inside. The air smelled of pine and dust. Michael set a small fire in the old iron stove while Sarah sat at the table, staring at the envelope. "Open it," he said softly. Her fingers trembled as she peeled away the frozen edges and unfolded the paper inside. Eleanor's handwriting, delicate, elegant, filled the page. "To whoever finds this, if you are reading these words, then what I feared has come to pass. The truth was never meant to die with me. Michael, if this reaches you, forgive me for the years I stole. I did it to protect our son, and to protect you. David is alive. He always was. But he is not the only one who deceived you. There is someone else in your home, someone you trust, who helped him. You will know who when the music stops." Sarah's breath caught. Someone else. Michael shook his head. There's no one else left. She looked up at him slowly. What if she didn't mean past tense? What if she meant someone still alive? Before Michael could respond, something caught his eye, a flash of metal in the ashes on the table. He brushed away the soot and found a small USB drive, etched with Eleanor's initials. He stared at it, stunned. She left a recording? Sarah leaned closer. There's an old laptop in the back room. They plugged it in. The drive loaded, one file dated 20 years ago. For Michael. Michael clicked it. The screen flickered, and there she was, Eleanor Carter, sitting at that same piano, her eyes tired but calm. "If you're watching this, Michael, then I'm already gone. You've probably been told it was an accident. It wasn't. David wanted control, not of the company, but of Samuel, our son's inheritance. His identity, they were the key. He wanted to use him, to own him. I couldn't let that happen. I sent Samuel away. I made sure he'd never be found, not even by you, until he was safe. But David, he found me before I could finish what I started." Her eyes darted toward the camera, fear flickering behind the comm. "There's something you must understand. If he's watching this too, if they are, then it means Sarah isn't who you think she is. But she's the only one who can finish this. Trust her, Michael. Trust her, even if it hurts." The screen went black. Sarah froze. What did she mean by that? Michael's jaw tightened. His eyes searched hers, doubt creeping in like cold water. "Sarah," he said slowly, "how long have you really been here? Who sent you?" She shook her head, tears forming. "I told you. Samuel." But Michael cut her off. "Eleanor said there was someone working with David. Someone I trusted. How do I know that wasn't you?" Her voice broke. "Because I saved your life. Or maybe you were saving his plan," he snapped. The fire cracked violently in the stove, filling the silence. Then a sound. A faint beep from Michael's pocket. He pulled out his phone. One new voicemail. No number. He pressed play. At first, only static. Then, a voice distorted, almost mechanical. "You shouldn't have watched it, Michael." Michael froze. "Your wife told you to trust her. But she never said which her." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's David." Michael looked at her. "No, that's someone else." The voicemail continued, one last line before it cut off. "Your son isn't dead. But if you want to see him again, come home." The call ended. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Home, he means." Michael nodded slowly. "The mansion." They both turned to look out the window. Through the fog, down by the frozen lake. Smoke still curled from the ruins, and for a moment, just a moment, a figure moved among the ashes. Michael's voice trembled. "He's waiting." Sarah stepped closer to the window, her voice barely a whisper. "That's not David." The figure stopped, then turned toward them. In his hand, something glinted, a locket, reflecting the morning light. Michael's heart stopped. "That's Eleanor's." The figure raised a hand and waved. The wind howled across Lake Tahoe as night fell again. dragging a curtain of snow over what was left of the Carter estate. The ruins loomed like a monument to secrets, every shadow heavy with memory. Michael stood at the edge of the driveway, headlights cutting through the storm. His face was drawn, hollowed by sleeplessness and disbelief. Beside him, Sarah clutched her coat tight. "You really think he's here?" Michael didn't answer. He only stared at the mansion's remains, then whispered. He said to come home. They moved slowly toward the entrance, or what used to be one. The fire had gutted everything, but the marble floor still shimmered under layers of frost. In the center of the room stood a single object that hadn't been there before. An old rotary phone, black and polished, sitting atop the cracked piano. Sarah's voice trembled. "That wasn't there when we left." Michael stepped closer. The phone rang once. Then again. He froze. "Michael," Sarah whispered, "don't." He picked up the receiver. "Who is this?" A distorted voice answered, slow and deliberate. "You shouldn't have ignored me." Michael's pulse spiked. "David." "David is dead." Silence. Only the crackle of static and the soft hum of the line. "You want the truth. You've always wanted it, but you buried it the moment she died." Michael's grip tightened. "What do you want? You have something of mine." "What are you talking about?" "My wife." Michael froze. "Sarah." Sarah stepped back, eyes wide. "What?" The voice continued, almost taunting. "You think she was sent by your son. She wasn't. She was sent by me." Sarah's lips parted. "That's not true. Tell him, Sarah. Tell him who really gave you that letter. Tell him what you promised me." Tears welled in her eyes. "Michael, please." He turned to her, voice shaking. "Is this true?" "I thought it was the only way to find Samuel," she cried. "They told me if I kept watch over you, if I kept quiet, I'd get him back." Michael's voice hardened. "Who told you?" Before she could answer, the line went dead. The power flickered, lights bursting to life across the ruins. Michael turned slowly toward the grand staircase. A figure stood at the top. Black coat, silver hair, a scar down the right cheek. David Carter. Michael's breath caught. "You're supposed to be dead." David descended slowly, his boots echoing against the marble. "So were you, brother?" Sarah stepped back, whispering. "You were the one who called?" David smirked. "Who else? You think you can burn me out of existence? You forget who built this house." Michael's fists clenched. "What do you want from us?" David's eyes glinted coldly. "Closure. And the truth." He tossed something across the floor, a small locket, dented but unmistakable. Inside was a photo, Eleanor holding a baby boy. "She hid him from me," David said. "Our blood, my own nephew, stolen." Michael shook his head. "You tried to kill her. You killed my family." David's voice broke for a moment, the first crack of emotion. "No, brother. I tried to save us. She lied to you. She lied to both of us." Sarah looked between them, tears streaking down her face. "What do you mean?" David turned his gaze to her. "Eleanor didn't send Samuel away to protect him from me. She sent him away to protect him from Michael." The words hung in the air like thunder. Michael's face went white. "You're lying." "Am I?" David whispered. "Ask her." He pointed to Sarah. Michael's eyes searched her face. "Tell me he's lying." Sarah looked away, trembling. I don't know anymore." David took another step forward. Eleanor made her choice. She thought she could play both sides, but love makes fools of us all. Then another sound. From the doorway came a faint creak. Michael turned. A young man stepped out of the shadows, soaked, trembling, eyes filled with fear. Sarah gasped, dropping to her knees. "Samuel." The room went still. David smiled. "Now you see. The prodigal son returns." Michael stared, breath caught in his chest. "My God." Samuel looked from one man to the other. "You both need to stop. She didn't die because of either of you. She died because she knew I wasn't supposed to exist." Michael's voice cracked. "What are you saying?" Samuel took a step forward, his eyes cold, distant. "She hid me because I wasn't your son, Michael." The world stopped. The air itself seemed to vanish. David's smirk faded. "Then whose?" Samuel looked at him. "Yours." A gunshot exploded through the room. Sarah screamed. The gunshot echoed across Lake Tahoe, then vanished into the snow. For a moment, everything froze. The sound swallowed by the storm outside, the silence thick and unnatural. Michael stumbled backward. the world tilting around him. David stood at the base of the stairs, his gun trembling in his hand. Smoke curled from the barrel, thin and ghostly. On the marble floor, Samuel lay motionless. Sarah's scream tore through the mansion. She fell beside him, clutching his body, blood staining her hands. No, 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 please stay with me. Michael's knees buckled. What have you done? David's voice cracked. I didn't mean to. He was going to kill you, Michael. You saw his eyes. He wasn't your son. Michael turned, his face a mask of grief and fury. You don't get to say that. David took a step back, desperate. Broken. He was going to ruin everything. You think she hid him from me? From you. She hid him from the truth. Sarah lifted her head, her face pale. You don't know anything about the truth. David's gaze flickered between them, confusion, guilt, something human. Then he dropped the gun. It clattered against the floor, echoing through the hollow halls. Michael moved to Samuel's side, pressing his hand to the young man's chest. He's still breathing, he whispered. Sarah, call for help. But the phone, the old rotary phone, was gone, vanished from the piano. Sarah's voice trembled. Michael, look. Where the phone had been, a single envelope now lay, yellowed and sealed with wax. The initials on it, EC. Michael's hands shook as he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Eleanor's handwriting unmistakable. If you're reading this, it means the truth has already destroyed what little peace we had left. Michael, I never meant to lie. Samuel was born from the love I couldn't admit, from the man who promised to protect you even as he envied you. He was both of yours. Raise him not as a weapon, but as a bridge. The past can only be buried if you both choose to forgive. Michael's eyes filled with tears. Both of ours. He looked up at David, pale, stunned, whispering, Eleanor. Sarah sobbed, her hand over Samuel's heart. He's fading. The lights flickered once more. When morning came, the storm had passed. The mansion stood silent, shrouded in white. Police cars lined the driveway, their sirens muted by snow. Inside, officers moved cautiously through the ruins. No bodies, just trails of blood. One set leading toward the dock, another into the forest behind the lake. Detective Harris stood by the piano, his breath misting in the cold. What a mess, he muttered. Then he saw it, a note resting on the piano keys, held down by the same locket David had dropped. He unfolded it carefully. If love couldn't save us then, maybe truth will now. The detective frowned, glancing toward the lake. What truth? Outside, the camera pans slowly across the frozen water. Beneath the surface, faintly, a shape drifts unrecognizable. Then a sound. Piano notes. Soft, distant. Eleanor's song. The camera tilts up toward the horizon as the sun breaks through the clouds, spilling light across the lake, golden. Mournful? Beautiful? A whisper lingers in the air.
Some secrets never die. They just change who they belong